My daughter-in-law collapsed at her baby shower when a DNA report appeared on her phone. The sender? My name. But I never sent it. What she read inside made her scream my son's name before everything went black. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Margaret Chen, and I'm 67 years old. For most of my life, I believed that kindness was a superpower. That if you loved hard enough, sacrificed deep enough, and trusted completely, the universe would protect you from truly cruel people. I was wrong about that. Dead wrong. And I spent 40 years as an elementary school teacher in Portland, Oregon. Every September, 25 new faces would look up at me with hope and fear and possibility. I taught them to read, to think critically, to be kind to each other. I stayed late to tutor struggling students. I spent my own money on supplies when the school budget ran dry. I believed in shaping young minds with patience and unconditional positive regard. When my husband David died 3 years ago after a brutal fight with pancreatic cancer, my world didn't end. It just got smaller, quieter, lonelier. Our small 2-bedroom apartment felt cavernous without his laugh, without his terrible jokes, without the sound of him humming while doing dishes. But I survived because I still had our son, Tom. Tom was 35, a software engineer with a good heart and his father's trusting nature. He was my purpose after David passed. Every Wednesday we had lunch at the same diner where we'd celebrated his childhood milestones. Those 2 hours each week were my lifeline to joy. I'm the kind of woman who still sends handwritten birthday cards, who bakes cookies for the church food bank every Sunday, who volunteers at the community center teaching English to immigrants who remind me of my own parents. I babysat my neighbor's children for free because I missed the sound of laughter in my home. My apartment was filled with knitted blankets I made for charity, photo albums documenting a life of service, and David's woodworking tools that I couldn't bear to donate. People at church called me Saint Margaret, not because I was perfect, but because I genuinely couldn't understand cruelty. I saw the best in everyone. When someone hurt me, I assumed it was unintentional. I apologized when others were wrong because keeping peace felt more important than being right. That softness, that inability to believe in evil, nearly cost me everything. When Tom married Jessica 2 years ago, I welcomed her with open arms despite the whisper of unease in my gut. She was beautiful, charming, and made my son smile in ways I hadn't seen since before David got sick. I wanted so desperately for Tom to be happy, to have the family David and I had dreamed he would build. I ignored the small red flags, the inconsistencies in her stories, the way she isolated Tom from old friends, the fact that she had no family at the wedding and vague explanations why. I told myself I was being an overprotective mother, jealous of losing my son's attention. I was kind when I should have been cautious, trusting when I should have been investigating, silent when I should have been screaming warnings. Because 3 months ago, Jessica announced she was pregnant, and my whole world began unraveling in ways I never imagined possible. This is the story of how I almost lost my son to a monster disguised as a daughter-in-law, and how I had to become someone I didn't recognize to save him. Before everything fell apart, my life had a rhythm that brought me peace. It wasn't exciting or glamorous, but it was mine. And after losing David, I'd learned to find beauty in simple routines. Every morning at 6 o'clock, I brewed chamomile tea in the delicate china pot David gave me for our 20th anniversary. The handle had a small chip from the day he died. I dropped it when the hospice nurse called to say he'd passed, but I never replaced it. That chip was a scar we both carried. I would sit by my apartment window with that tea, watching the neighborhood wake up. Mrs. Patterson walked her golden retriever at 6:15. The newspaper delivery truck rumbled past at 6:30. The maple tree outside my window had been there for all 40 seasons. I'd lived in this building, and I knew every branch, like old friends. My weeks followed a comforting pattern. Tuesdays meant volunteering at the community center, teaching English to recent immigrants. There was Maria from Guatemala, learning phrases to help her communicate at her daughter's parent-teacher conferences. And Chen Wei from China, no relation despite the shared last name, practicing interview skills for citizenship. Their determination reminded me why I'd become a teacher in the first place. Wednesdays were sacred. Those were my lunch days with Tom at Rosie's Diner, the place with red vinyl booths and a jukebox that only played songs from the 70s. We always sat in the same booth by the window. I always ordered chicken salad on wheat bread. Tom always ordered the burger and teased me about being predictable. We talked about his work projects, office politics, weekend plans. He asked for advice about things that didn't really need advice. He just wanted to hear my thoughts. Those 2 hours each week were my connection to the son I'd raised alone after David died. Thursdays, I spent at the public library, organizing book drives for underprivileged schools. I loved the smell of old books, the quiet rustle of pages, the way stories could transport anyone anywhere regardless of their circumstances. I'd spent my teaching career proving that literacy was freedom and retirement didn't change that mission. Friday evenings were for video calls with my old teaching colleagues. We'd share stories about former students who'd gone on to do remarkable things, laugh about classroom disasters from decades ago, and remind each other that we'd made a difference even when it hadn't felt like it. Weekends belonged to my tiny balcony garden. I grew tomatoes that actually tasted like something, basil that perfumed my whole apartment, and David's favorite yellow roses. He'd planted the original bush in our backyard 30 years ago. When we downsized to the apartment after his diagnosis, I'd taken a cutting. Those roses blooming each June felt like he was still with me somehow. Then 3 months ago, Tom called with news that transformed everything. Jessica was pregnant. I was going to be a grandmother. I cried tears of pure joy that day. After years of loneliness, after watching Tom search for the right partner, after wondering if I'd ever hold a grandchild, this felt like a blessing. I immediately started knitting a yellow baby blanket, unable to decide on pink or blue, wanting it to be perfect. I began setting aside money from my modest pension. $20 here, $50 there, tucked into an envelope marked Baby Fund. I dreamed of spoiling this child the way I never could with Tom during those lean years when David was sick. I imagined reading bedtime stories, teaching the child to garden, passing down David's pocket watch and my mother's recipes. I started shopping at garage sales for baby books, collecting little wooden toys and soft stuffed animals. My apartment, which had felt so empty after David passed, suddenly felt warm with anticipation. I had no idea I was decorating a nursery for a ghost, that the family I cherished was about to become the stage for a betrayal so cruel it would shatter everything I believed about love and trust. It started so small I almost missed it. A moment so brief that if I'd blinked, I might have convinced myself it never happened. But I didn't blink. And what I saw planted a seed of doubt that would eventually grow into the truth. It was a Saturday afternoon in late spring. Jessica had texted Tom that morning complaining about severe morning sickness, how she could barely keep water down, how the pregnancy symptoms were overwhelming. Tom had been worried sick, calling me 3 times before noon asking if this was normal, if he should take her to the emergency room. I'd reassured him that first trimester nausea could be brutal, but I offered to bring over some homemade chicken soup and ginger tea, remedies that had helped me when I was pregnant with him. Tom gratefully gave me the go-ahead, so I spent the afternoon in my kitchen, cooking with the kind of love only a grandmother-to-be can muster. I arrived at their house around 3 o'clock, letting myself in with the spare key Tom had given me months earlier. "For emergencies, Mom, you're always welcome," he'd said when pressing it into my palm. The house was quiet when I entered, the kind of stillness that usually indicates someone sleeping or resting. But then I heard Jessica's voice from upstairs, bright, energetic, laughing loudly like she didn't have a care in the world. I froze at the bottom of the stairs, the warm container of soup heavy in my hands. Her voice carried clearly through the old house. No, no morning sickness today. I'm totally fine. Want to grab brunch tomorrow? Yeah, I'm craving mimosas so bad. I know, but one won't hurt, right? My stomach dropped. Mimosas? First trimester pregnant women didn't drink alcohol. And that voice, it wasn't the voice of someone battling nausea. It was carefree, performative even, like she was speaking to an audience. I stood there, paralyzed, unsure what to do. Leave quietly and pretend I hadn't heard? Call up to announce myself? The soup was getting heavy, my arms starting to ache. Then I heard footsteps above, and suddenly Jessica appeared at the top of the stairs. When she saw me, her entire demeanor transformed in a heartbeat. Her shoulders slumped dramatically. Her face went pale. She clutched the banister like she might collapse. "Oh, Margaret, I didn't hear you come in. I'm feeling so terrible today. The morning sickness is just awful." I studied her face, searching for genuine discomfort. Her makeup was flawless, perfectly applied eyeliner and lipstick. Her hair was styled in loose waves. She wore tight designer jeans and a fitted blouse, not exactly the comfort clothes of someone who'd been vomiting all morning. "I heard you on the phone," I said gently, trying not to sound accusatory. "You sounded happy, energetic." Something flickered behind Jessica's eyes. Annoyance? Fear? It vanished so quickly I wondered if I'd imagined it. She gave me a weak smile. "Oh, that was just me trying to sound normal for my friend Sarah. You know how it is. I didn't want her to worry about me." The explanation made sense. Sort of. People do put on brave faces for friends. I wanted it to make sense. I handed over the soup, my hands trembling slightly, and Jessica took it with exaggerated gratitude. We sat together for an awkward cup of tea. Jessica played her role perfectly, touching her stomach tenderly, complaining about food aversions, asking me questions about my own pregnancy that I answered mechanically. But I couldn't shake the image of her standing at the top of those stairs in tight jeans, laughing about mimosas, minutes after telling my son she was too sick to function. When I left an hour later, I sat in my car for 10 minutes before starting the engine. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I replayed the moment over and over. The quick transformation, the perfect makeup, those tight jeans on a supposedly pregnant belly, the genuine sound of her laugh before she knew she was being heard. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and tried to rationalize it all away. Maybe pregnancy affected different women differently. Maybe Jessica was one of those people who got ready even when feeling terrible. Maybe I was just being a paranoid old woman who watched too many crime documentaries. I pushed the unease down deep, buried it, beneath my desperate desire to believe, to trust, to keep the peace in my family. After all, Tom was happy. Tom was glowing with excitement about becoming a father. But seeds of doubt, once planted, don't need much to grow. And this seed had found fertile ground in a grandmother's instinct that something was very, very wrong. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in self-gaslighting. I became an expert at talking myself out of my own observations, at rewriting what I'd seen and heard into something less sinister, less troubling, less real. Every morning I woke up with that conversation replaying in my mind. Jessica's laugh, the mimosa's comment, the instant transformation when she saw me. But before my feet hit the floor, I'd already begun the work of convincing myself it meant nothing. I sat at my kitchen table with my morning tea, the yellow baby blanket growing longer with each passing day, and I lectured myself like I was a misbehaving student. "You're being paranoid, Margaret. This is your son's wife, your grandchild's mother. What kind of monster suspects a pregnant woman of lying? What kind of mother-in-law are you becoming?" At church on Sundays, I found myself praying for forgiveness instead of guidance. I knelt in the familiar pew, rosary beads warm and smooth in my weathered hands, and whispered, "Forgive me for having such ugly thoughts about Jessica. Help me be a better mother-in-law. Help me trust her the way Tom does." Reverend Patterson gave a sermon about judgment and grace, and I felt like he was speaking directly to me. "We are called to believe the best about others," he said, his voice echoing through the sanctuary, "to extend trust and love freely without suspicion poisoning our hearts." I went home that Sunday feeling ashamed of myself. Who was I to doubt? Who was I to question? During our Wednesday lunch at Rosie's Diner, I watched Tom talk about baby names and nursery colors with such pure joy that I felt physically sick with guilt. His face radiated happiness I hadn't seen since he was a child on Christmas morning. How could I possibly bring darkness to that light? "Mom, you seem distant today," Tom said, reaching across the booth to touch my hand. "Is everything okay?" This was my moment, my chance to voice my concerns, to tell him about the overheard phone call, to ask gentle questions that might lead to truth. But when I looked into his eyes, David's eyes so full of trust and love, the words died in my throat. "I'm just emotional, sweetheart," I heard myself say, squeezing his hand. "My baby is having a baby. These are happy tears." Tom's face relaxed into relief. "Jessica mentioned you seemed a bit strange when you visited last Saturday. I told her you're just excited and probably a little worried, which is totally normal. First-time grandmas are allowed to be emotional wrecks." Strange. Jessica had told Tom I seemed strange, not worried, not caring. Strange. The word felt like a small knife between my ribs, but I smiled through it. She's right. I probably was acting odd. The excitement just overwhelmed me. I was doing Jessica's work for her, providing explanations for my own suspicions, smoothing over any concerns before they could take root in Tom's mind. The following week, Jessica posted Instagram stories from a downtown wine bar, glasses of rosé on the table, her and her friends laughing in a dimly lit booth. The post was up for maybe 3 hours before it disappeared, but I'd seen it. I'd screenshot it before I could stop myself. Then I deleted the screenshot and felt ashamed for taking it in the first place. Maybe it was old from before the pregnancy. Maybe the drinks were for her friends, and she was just there. Maybe. When I gently suggested Jessica see her obstetrician because she looked quite thin for someone supposedly entering the second trimester, her response was sharp and immediate. "Every pregnancy is different, Margaret. My doctor says everything is perfect. Are you saying I'm lying about my medical care?" No, of course not." I backpedaled immediately, horrified. "I'm just worried. I care about you and the baby." Jessica's expression softened, but something calculated lurked behind her eyes. "I know you care. But constant scrutiny isn't helpful, Margaret. It's actually really stressful for the baby. My doctor said I need to avoid stress." So now my concern was hurting the baby. My love was transformed into a threat. I apologized profusely, brought flowers the next day, and vowed to be less intrusive, less questioning, less present in their lives. I was erasing myself to keep peace with a woman who was lying to my son. The truth arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered not through investigation or confrontation, but through pure accident. Sometimes fate has a sense of timing. Tom had called me the previous evening. "Mom, Jessica and I are heading upstate for a long weekend. There's this amazing spa retreat for expectant mothers. Relaxation, prenatal massages, the whole thing. Could you stop by the house and water the plants while we're gone?" I'd agreed immediately, grateful for any chance to feel useful, to maintain my connection to their lives, despite Jessica's subtle efforts to keep me at arm's length. "Of course, sweetheart. You two enjoy yourselves." So Tuesday morning found me standing in their living room with my watering can, moving methodically through their home. I watered the ferns by the window, the succulents on the kitchen counter, the orchid in the bathroom that Tom had bought for their anniversary. In the master bedroom, a plant on Jessica's nightstand looked particularly thirsty, its leaves drooping sadly. I moved toward it carefully, aware that their bedroom felt like private territory I shouldn't linger in. As I reached to water it, my elbow caught the edge of Jessica's laptop, which had been perched precariously on the nightstand's edge. I grabbed for it instinctively, but it tumbled onto the bed, the screen flashing to life from the impact. My heart pounded with embarrassment and concern. Had I broken it? I picked it up carefully, intending to simply close it and place it safely on the dresser. But the screen was open to Jessica's email inbox, and one subject line caught my eye like a fishhook snagging flesh, impossible to ignore. Pregnancy belly prosthetic. Shipping confirmation. My breath caught in my throat. Pregnancy belly prosthetic. The words didn't make sense together. They couldn't mean what they seemed to mean. I shouldn't look. This was private. This was a violation of trust. But my finger moved to the trackpad almost without conscious thought, clicking the email open. The words on the screen made the room tilt sideways. Dear Ms. Jessica Hartley, thank you for your purchase. Your custom silicone pregnancy belly, 5 to 6 months, has shipped via express delivery. This prosthetic is ideal for theater productions, photography, and personal use. It's virtually undetectable and comes with adjustable straps for comfort. Your custom second trimester prosthetic will follow next month as scheduled. Please let us know if you need the third trimester size sooner. Best regards, Realistic Props Theater Supply. The watering can slipped from my hand, water spilling across their beige carpet. I didn't notice. I couldn't breathe. The words blurred and refocused as my brain tried desperately to make them mean something other than what they clearly said. Prosthetic, theater production, second trimester, third trimester. My hands shaking violently, I clicked to see the order history. There were more purchases. A digital file called Fake Positive Pregnancy Test, High Resolution. Maternity clothes in sizes far too large for Jessica's frame. A book titled Method Acting, Embodying Your Character Completely. Then I saw the dates. The prosthetic had been ordered 2 months ago, 3 weeks after Jessica announced her pregnancy to Tom. My legs gave out. I sat heavily on their bed, the laptop burning in my trembling hands like evidence of a crime I'd just uncovered. My daughter-in-law was faking the pregnancy. The entire pregnancy was a lie. Every baby shower gift, every nursery purchase, every excited conversation Tom had about becoming a father, every dream I'd had about holding my grandchild, all of it built on a foundation of calculated deception. I don't remember closing the laptop or cleaning up the spilled water. I don't remember locking their door or driving home. One moment I was sitting on that bed, staring at proof of Jessica's fraud, and the next I was in my own kitchen, my hands still shaking, the spare key to their house sitting on my table, like an accusation. Why would she do this? What could she possibly gain from such an elaborate, cruel lie? And more terrifying than any answer I could imagine. What was I supposed to do with this information? I lasted 3 days. 3 days of carrying the weight of that email like a stone in my chest, barely eating, barely sleeping, rehearsing conversations in my head until the words lost all meaning. But I couldn't stay silent. Tom deserved to know. He needed to know. I called him Tuesday morning, my voice tight and strained. Tom, can we meet today? It's important. Very important. The worry in his voice was immediate. Is it your health, Mom? Are you sick? No, sweetheart, but we need to talk. Just the two of us, please. We met at Rosie's Diner an hour later, but this time the red vinyl booth that held so many happy memories felt like a witness stand. My chicken salad sat untouched as I wrung my napkin in my lap, trying to find words that would shatter my son's world as gently as possible. Tom, I need to tell you something about Jessica. My voice cracked. When I was watering your plants, I accidentally knocked over her laptop and I saw an email. Something terrible. Tom's expression shifted from concern to defensive wariness. What do you mean? I told him everything. The email from Realistic Props, the prosthetic belly purchases, the fake ultrasound files, the dates that proved these weren't old Halloween costumes or theater props, but recent purchases timed precisely with her pregnancy announcement. I watched my son's face transform with each word, but the transformation wasn't what I expected. His confusion hardened into anger. But the anger wasn't directed at Jessica. "You went through her computer?" Tom's voice turned to ice. "You violated her privacy? You snooped through her personal emails?" "Tom, listen to me." "No, you listen, Mom." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Other diners turned to stare. "I can't believe you'd stoop this low. You've never really approved of Jessica, have you? You've been looking for reasons to break us up since day one." "That's not true. I welcomed her with open arms." "You've been acting weird around her for months. She told me you were being cold, asking invasive questions, showing up unannounced. I defended you. I said my mom would never be that kind of jealous mother-in-law. But here we are." Each word felt like a physical blow. "Tom, please, just ask her to show you real medical records, real ultrasound appointments with doctors you can verify." "She has medical records. I've been to appointments with her." Tom's face flushed red, his voice rising. "There's an explanation for that email. Maybe it's for a friend's theater project. Maybe it's a surprise gift. Maybe it's absolutely none of your business. Tom, please listen." "I think you're jealous, Mom." The words hit like a slap. "Dad's gone. I'm starting my own family. You're afraid of being alone, afraid of being replaced. You're so desperate to stay relevant in my life that you'd rather destroy my marriage than accept that my wife is pregnant with your grandchild." Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't speak through the devastation crushing my chest. Tom threw cash on the table and leaned close, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Stay away from us, stay away from my wife, stay away from my baby, until you can apologize to Jessica for this insane, hurtful accusation, until you can act like a decent human being. I don't want to see you." He walked out, leaving me alone in that booth, surrounded by the pitying stares of strangers who'd witnessed my humiliation. I called him 17 times that day. Every call went straight to voicemail. I sent desperate text messages begging him to just consider the possibility, to investigate, to protect himself. Nothing. Dorothy found me 3 hours later, still sitting in that same booth, my cold chicken salad congealed on the plate, my face swollen from crying. That night, alone in my apartment, I stared at the yellow baby blanket I'd been knitting with such love. 3 days later, Tom sent one final text message. "Jessica is willing to forgive you if you apologize, but I'm not sure I can. You broke my trust in a way I didn't think possible. Dad would be ashamed of you." Those last 5 words destroyed what remained of my heart. The first week after Tom cut me off, I barely functioned. I lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. Food tasted like ash. Sleep came in scattered, nightmare-filled fragments. My friends from church called with concern, but I couldn't face their pity or their questions. But somewhere around day 10, something shifted. The grief began to calcify into something harder, sharper. If Tom wouldn't listen to warnings, maybe I needed to understand exactly what I was warning him about. Late one night, unable to sleep, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and began to dig. Not emotionally, not frantically, but methodically. Like I was researching a lesson plan, gathering facts, building a comprehensive picture. I started with a simple question. Why would someone fake a pregnancy? What was the end game? Then I remembered something that made my blood turn cold. 6 months ago, Tom had mentioned his life insurance policy during one of our Wednesday lunches. "I should probably update my beneficiaries," he'd said casually, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Right now, everything goes to you if something happens to me. But with Jessica and the baby, it doesn't seem fair that my wife and child would get nothing." The policy was substantial. $350,000. Money David had sacrificed for, working overtime at the construction company, even when his body was screaming for rest, all to ensure I'd be taken care of if he died first. "Of course you should update it," I'd told Tom that day. "Your family should be protected." But had he actually changed it? I pulled out my file box of important documents and found the policy paperwork Tom had given me years ago. I was still listed as sole beneficiary. He must not have gotten around to updating it yet. Then there was the house refinancing Tom had mentioned. "We want to pull out equity for nursery renovations," he'd said. $30,000 against the house he'd worked so hard to pay down, and the joint bank account Jessica had insisted on opening right after the wedding. At the time, I'd thought it was sweet. Partnership. Trust. Now I wondered how much money she already had access to. My hands trembling, I opened my laptop and searched for Jessica's name. I'd never done this before, had always believed it was invasive and showed a lack of trust. But desperation makes investigators of us all. What I found made me physically ill. Jessica Hartley had been married twice before. Both marriages lasted less than 2 years. The first husband had come from a wealthy family. After the divorce, forum posts suggested he'd been left with significant debt. The second husband had filed a police report about missing funds from their joint accounts before the divorce was finalized. I found a wedding-shaming website where former bridesmaids called Jessica manipulative and money-obsessed. A blog post from a college roommate detailed how Jessica had faked a family emergency to avoid paying 3 months of rent. But the worst discovery was a small-town newspaper article from 5 years ago, "Local Woman Under Investigation for Charity Fraud." The details were vague due to legal settlements, but the grainy photo was unmistakably Jessica. Younger but identical. She'd organized a fundraiser for a child's cancer treatment, a child that turned out not to exist. She'd collected over $40,000 before someone started asking questions. I sat back from my laptop, my heart pounding so hard I felt dizzy. This wasn't about love or family or even wanting a baby. This was a pattern, a predatory pattern. Jessica was a professional con artist, and Tom was her latest mark. She wasn't planning to deliver a baby. She was planning to stage a miscarriage. The tragedy would cement her position as Tom's vulnerable, traumatized wife. He'd change the life insurance to comfort her. He'd give her access to everything to help her heal. And I, the interfering mother-in-law who'd stressed her during the pregnancy, would be blamed for the loss. Then Jessica would slowly drain him dry and disappear, just like she'd done to the others. Tom wasn't just being lied to, he was being hunted. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening, exactly 4 weeks after Tom walked out of the diner and out of my life. I'd been driving past their house again, something I'd done a dozen times despite knowing it was pathetic and desperate. I just needed to see him, to know with my own eyes that he was okay. The guilt ate at me constantly. What if I was wrong? What if Jessica really was pregnant and I'd destroyed my relationship with my son over paranoia? But when I drove past that evening, I saw Tom through the front window of the nursery, painting the walls a soft sky blue. He was smiling, totally absorbed in his work, carefully cutting in around the window frame with steady hands. He looked peaceful, content, excited. And I realized with devastating clarity that I was watching him build a room for a child that didn't exist, preparing his heart for a baby that would never come, setting himself up for a manufactured tragedy that Jessica would use to destroy him. I sat in my car 3 houses down, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to run to that door, shake him, make him see, but I was powerless, erased from his life like I'd never mattered at all. I drove home in a fog and collapsed on my living room floor. That's when the memories hit me, not gently but like a tidal wave, drowning me in decades of sacrifice and unconditional love. Tom at 6 years old crying because kids said he was poor. I'd worked double shifts for a month to buy him those name-brand sneakers, then worked another month to catch up on bills, eating crackers and peanut butter for dinner for 6 weeks straight. Tom at 12, devastated about not making the basketball team. David, already dying from cancer, had gotten out of his hospital bed to drive Tom to the court every evening, for 3 months. Tom made the team the next year. David died 2 months later, but he'd seen his son succeed first. Tom at 18, sobbing in my arms before college. "Mom, I can't leave you alone." And I'd held his face and said, You don't leave me behind, you make me proud. You go live the life we sacrificed for. Tom 6 months ago, sitting in this very living room saying, Mom, you gave me everything. Now it's my turn to take care of you. You'll never be alone, I promise. I sobbed on that floor, clutching the yellow baby blanket, 40 years of being a good mother crashing over me. I had given him everything, my youth, my dreams, my financial security, my whole heart. I'd been the mother who asked for nothing in return, and now I was being punished for trying to protect him. I crawled to the mantel where David's ashes sat and pressed my forehead against the cool ceramic. I failed him, I whispered. I let a con artist take our son from us. What kind of mother am I? The apartment felt suffocating. Photos of Tom surrounded me, every single milestone, and in every photo I was there, supporting, celebrating, loving unconditionally. But where was I now in his life? Erased, replaced, discarded like I meant nothing. It had been 29 days since I'd heard my son's voice, 29 days of silence that felt like death itself. I typed a message to Tom. I love you. Whatever you believe about me, I love you. I always will. My finger hovered over send, but I didn't press it, because I knew Jessica wouldn't allow Tom to soften. Every message I sent was probably ammunition against me. I deleted the message and threw my phone across the room. I'd survived poverty, an abusive childhood, David's slow death, years of widowhood. But this? Losing my son to a predator's manipulation? This was breaking me in ways nothing else ever had. I cried until there was nothing left, until my body was empty and my apartment was silent except for the ticking of David's handmade clock. Then, in that silence, something shifted. I thought about Jessica's previous victims. They'd all been caught off guard. They'd trusted until it was too late. But I knew what was coming. I understood the con before it finished. And unlike those other victims, I wasn't protecting assets or reputation. I was a mother protecting her child. That was different power entirely. I stood slowly, washed my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked destroyed, aged, beaten. But underneath, something new was forming. Determination. She wants war, I whispered to my reflection. Let her think she's won. Because sometimes the best weapon is being underestimated. The morning after my breakdown, I woke with painful clarity. My eyes were swollen, my head ached, but my mind was sharper than it had been in months. I'd spent 30 years teaching children that truth was worth fighting for. It was time to practice what I'd preached. Over coffee, I made a list, not emotional and scattered, but strategic and methodical. I numbered each item in my careful teacher's handwriting. The plan: document everything I know. Gather concrete, undeniable evidence, identify Jessica's endgame and timeline. Find allies who will believe me. Choose the right moment for exposure. Protect Tom. Legally and financially, I pulled out a composition book and began writing down every suspicious detail about Jessica's pregnancy. Dates, conversations, observations. I created a timeline comparing her behavior to actual pregnancy symptoms. Next, I screenshot everything I'd found about Jessica's past, the previous marriages, the charity fraud, the forum posts. I saved it all to flash drives, one for my safety deposit box, one hidden in my apartment, one mailed to Dorothy with instructions to keep it safe without questions. Then came the hard part, gathering new evidence without access to Tom or Jessica. That's when I remembered Dorothy's nephew, Tyler, who worked in digital forensics for a law firm. He specialized in uncovering fraud. I called Dorothy. I need help, real help, and I need you to trust me even though what I'm asking sounds crazy. Dorothy didn't hesitate. What do you need? We met at her house that afternoon. Tyler was serious and kind, with wire-rimmed glasses and a patient demeanor. I showed him everything, the emails, the research, the evidence of Jessica's past. Tyler listened without judgment. Mrs. Chen, what you're describing is fraud. But proving someone is faking a pregnancy without medical records is incredibly difficult. However, if Jessica has been purchasing prosthetics or communicating about her plan digitally, that's evidence. The question is how to access it legally and how to expose it undeniably. The baby shower, Dorothy suddenly said. It's in 2 weeks. I'm banned from attending, I said bitterly. Jessica made sure of that. Tyler leaned forward. I can't tell you to do anything illegal, but I can tell you that if evidence of fraud were to become public at a gathering with multiple witnesses from a verifiable source, it would be much harder to deny or cover up. My mind raced. You mean if Jessica were exposed in front of everyone? I'm not saying anything specific, Tyler interrupted carefully, but Jessica monitors your communications with Tom, so any action needs to be unexpected, untraceable to you directly, and undeniable in its truth. That night, the answer came at 3 in the morning, and it was perfect. I would send Jessica the evidence from my number, but I wouldn't actually send it. Tyler had mentioned spoofing technology. If Jessica received proof of her fraud publicly at the baby shower, surrounded by witnesses, her genuine reaction would expose everything. Innocent people don't panic when confronted with false accusations. Guilty people do. The next morning, I called Tyler. I need to know if what I'm thinking is legal. I explained my plan. After a long pause, Tyler said, I'll help you, but we do this carefully, and we do this right. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. The revenge wasn't about cruelty. It was about precision. Margaret and Tyler met at Dorothy's house 2 days before the baby shower, documents spread across the dining table like battle plans. They had one chance to expose Jessica so completely there would be no room for doubt, no way to spin another lie. Walk me through the timeline one more time, Margaret said, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Tyler pulled up his laptop. The baby shower starts at 2 p.m. Saturday. Jessica will have her phone constantly. She's addicted to posting on social media. At exactly 3:15 during gift opening, she'll receive a text message that appears to come from your number. But I won't actually send it, Margaret confirmed. Correct. The message will be routed through an encrypted server using VoIP technology. Your actual phone will be at the church charity event with at least 50 witnesses. Dorothy will keep it in her purse on silent while you serve food. Margaret made notes. The message content? Tyler read from his screen. Jessica, we need to talk about the DNA results. Before you go any further with this pregnancy lie, you should know I had the prosthetic belly tested. I know everything. And the attachment? A PDF. The first page looks like DNA lab results, but actually reads, Jessica, before you go through with this, you should know we tested your prosthetic belly. This isn't my grandchild, it's rubber and lies. Following pages contain real evidence. Her emails to realistic props showing prosthetic purchases with dates, bank statements, photos of her in tight clothes during her supposed second trimester, and security footage showing her clearly not pregnant. Dorothy set down her coffee. What if she doesn't open it? She will, Margaret said with certainty. She's a narcissist. She won't resist knowing what I supposedly have. And the text is vague enough that she'll panic about what else I might know. Tyler continued. The key is the public setting. If this happened privately, she'd have time to craft a response, to play victim, to call Tom crying about harassment. But surrounded by 50 guests at her baby shower, her genuine reaction will be visible before she can control it. Guilty people panic, Margaret repeated softly. Even after seeing the evidence, she won't know what to do. Does she claim the documents are fake? Then she has to explain the verifiable purchase records. Does she play victim? 50 witnesses will have seen her real reaction first. Margaret's hands trembled. What if Tom hates me forever? Dorothy gripped her hand. Then at least you saved him from a predator who would have destroyed his life. Sometimes love means being willing to be the villain. That night, Margaret stood before David's urn. I'm doing this tomorrow. I'm exposing her. I'm saving our son. But David, I'm terrified. She imagined his response. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite being terrified. Saturday arrived with cruel, beautiful weather. Margaret dressed carefully for the church event, tucking her phone into Dorothy's purse exactly as planned. "Ready?" Dorothy asked. "No," Margaret admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." At 3:15 p.m., 5 miles away, Jessica's phone buzzed, and everything changed. The baby shower was flawless. Jessica had orchestrated every detail to perfection. 50 guests filled the backyard, pink and blue streamers wrapped around a white pergola, tables laden with elaborately wrapped gifts, a dessert spread that resembled a magazine photo shoot. Jessica wore a flowing, pale pink dress that perfectly accommodated her prosthetic belly, a flower crown nestled in her styled hair, her makeup camera-ready for the endless photographs. Tom stood beside her, one protective hand on her back, beaming with the pride of an expectant father. Margaret's absence felt like Jessica's greatest victory. She'd successfully isolated him from the one person who might expose her lies. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. At 3:10, they gathered for gift opening. Jessica settled into a white wicker throne decorated with flowers, Tom beside her, while guests formed a semicircle. Mountains of beautifully wrapped boxes sat before them. Cribs, strollers, clothes, toys, everything for a baby that would never exist. Jessica's phone rested on the small table beside her, face up. She'd been documenting every moment on Instagram, crafting the narrative of the perfect mother-to-be. At 3:15 exactly, the screen lit up. Margaret Chen. "Jessica, we need to talk about the DNA results. Before you go any further with this pregnancy lie, you should know I had the prosthetic belly tested. I know everything." Attached, DNA results, final.pdf. Jessica's heart stopped. Her hand froze mid-reach toward another gift. Around her, guests chatted and laughed, someone suggesting she open the largest box first. But Jessica heard nothing except roaring in her ears. Margaret knew. Margaret had evidence. Margaret was contacting her now, publicly, in the middle of everything. "Honey, you okay?" Tom's voice sounded distant. Jessica grabbed the phone with shaking hands. She couldn't let Tom see this, couldn't let anyone see. She needed to know exactly what Margaret had before countering it. "Just need to check something," she mumbled. "Give me 1 second." She opened the PDF, and the blood drained from her face. The first page looked official, DNA test results. But the text read, "Jessica, before you go through with this, you should know we tested your prosthetic belly. This isn't my grandchild, it's rubber and lies." Jessica's vision blurred. She scrolled frantically. Next page, screenshots of her emails to Realistic Props Theater Supply, order confirmations, her credit card, delivery dates for 5 to 6 month silicone pregnancy prosthetic. Next, bank statements showing purchases at bars during her first trimester. Maternity store transactions on days she'd claimed to be bedridden. Next, security footage showing her in tight yoga pants, stomach completely flat. Date stamped 3 weeks ago when she'd claimed to be 5 months pregnant. Final page, information about her previous marriages, the charity fraud, everything. Jessica's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the phone. Everyone was staring at her. Tom leaned forward, concern etched across his face. "Jess, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I need..." Jessica couldn't form words. Margaret had everything. Every single piece of evidence. And Margaret was threatening to send it to everyone here. "Jessica, you're scaring me." Tom gently took the phone from her trembling hands. "What did you read?" "No, don't..." Jessica lunged for it, but the prosthetic made her movement awkward, conspicuous. Tom was already looking at the screen, confusion spreading across his face. "It's from my mom? Why would she..." He opened the PDF. Jessica watched the color drain from his face exactly as it had drained from hers. The whispers started. Everything was unraveling. The backyard erupted into confused murmurs as Tom scrolled through the PDF, his face cycling through emotions too rapidly to name. Confusion, shock, horror, denial. devastation. "What is this?" His voice cracked. "What are these receipts for?" He looked up at Jessica, and his eyes held something that made her blood freeze. "Jessica, what is a pregnancy prosthetic?" "Tom, I can explain." Jessica reached for him, but he stepped backward. "Explain what?" His hand trembled, holding the phone. "Explain why you ordered a fake pregnant belly. Explain these emails. Explain security footage of you not pregnant 3 weeks ago when you were supposed to be showing." The whispers grew louder. Guests pulled out phones, sensing drama but not yet understanding its scope. Jessica's mind raced for an explanation, any lie that would work. "Your mother is sabotaging us. She's always hated me. These are doctored, fake." "They have dates," Tom interrupted quietly, still scrolling. "Transaction IDs, order confirmations, account numbers." He looked up, his face utterly destroyed. "Jessica, are you pregnant, yes or no?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Every eye in the backyard fixed on Jessica. 50 witnesses to this moment. She could see phones recording, capturing her panic for posterity. "Answer the question!" Tom's shout made everyone jump. "Are you pregnant?" Jessica's shoulders slumped. Her hands dropped from her belly, and in that moment of surrender, everyone saw the truth written across her face. "It's complicated," she whispered. "It's not complicated." Tom's voice broke with anguish. "You're either carrying my child or you're not. Are you pregnant?" Jessica's silence was deafening. Tom made a sound like he'd been gut-punched. He stumbled backward. "Oh my God, Mom was right. You've been lying this entire time." "Tom, listen." Jessica moved toward him. "Don't touch me." He held up both hands, backing away like she carried a disease. He looked around at the stunned guests, at the pile of gifts, at the welcome baby Hartley cake. "This is all fake. The pregnancy is fake. My wife has been running a con." Sarah, the nurse, stepped forward. "Jessica, if you're not pregnant, let me examine you right now. We can settle this immediately." "I don't need." "Then why won't you let her check?" Tom's voice turned deadly quiet. "If you're really pregnant, prove it. Right now, in front of everyone." Jessica looked at the faces surrounding her. Disgust, pity, shock. She saw phones recording her unraveling. Tom pressed his hand against her belly, and everyone saw him recoil. The prosthetic didn't feel like flesh. It felt like rubber. "You're not pregnant," Tom whispered, devastated. Jessica did the only thing left. She ran, kicked off her heels, and sprinted for the gate, the prosthetic bouncing awkwardly under her dress. The most damning evidence possible. Tom stood motionless in the chaos, then pulled out his phone with shaking hands. "Mom?" His voice broke. "Mom, I'm so sorry. You were right about everything." 5 miles away, Margaret's knees gave out as Dorothy caught her. Her son was finally coming home. Tom arrived at Margaret's apartment 40 minutes later, his eyes swollen from crying, his dress shirt wrinkled, looking like he'd aged 10 years in a single afternoon. He stood outside her door for a long moment before knocking, shame and relief warring across his devastated face. Margaret opened the door, still in her simple blue dress from the church event, Dorothy standing supportively behind her. When she saw her son, broken, sorry, needing her, she opened her arms without hesitation. Tom collapsed into his mother's embrace and sobbed like he hadn't since David's funeral. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I said such terrible things to you." "I know, sweetheart," Margaret whispered, holding him tightly, stroking his hair like when he was small. "It's okay. You're okay now." "It's not okay. I believed her over you. I told you Dad would be ashamed." His voice shattered completely. "Your father would understand," Margaret said firmly, pulling back to look at his face. "Tom, you trusted someone you loved. That's not weakness. That's being human. Jessica is a professional con artist. She's destroyed people before you." Tom wiped his face roughly. "How did you know? How did you figure it out?" Margaret explained everything. The overheard phone call, the accidentally discovered email, the research into Jessica's criminal past, the evidence Tyler helped compile. the carefully orchestrated exposure at the baby shower. I sent that message, Margaret admitted. I had help making it appear to come from my number while I was at church with witnesses. I knew she'd open it. I knew her reaction would tell you everything. Tom was quiet for a moment. You manipulated her the way she manipulated me. Yes, Margaret said simply. I beat a con artist at her own game. I would do it again in a heartbeat to save you. Over the following days, justice unfolded swiftly. Jessica was arrested at the airport trying to flee to Mexico with $30,000 from their joint account. She was charged with fraud, forgery for the fake ultrasounds, and theft. Tom filed for divorce and a restraining order simultaneously. The baby shower guests voluntarily gave statements to police. Tom's co-workers rallied around him instead of judging. Jessica's previous victims came forward when the news broke. Her carefully constructed house of cards collapsed entirely. 2 weeks later, Tom sat in Margaret's kitchen signing divorce papers. How are you feeling? Margaret asked gently. Humiliated, angry, but mostly grateful, Tom said. Grateful you love me enough to keep fighting when I made it impossible. I'll never give up on you, Margaret promised. That's what mothers do. Tom picked up the finished yellow baby blanket Margaret had knitted. What will you do with this? Keep it, Margaret said. Maybe one day you'll meet someone real, someone who deserves you. When you have a real child, I'll give it to them. I don't know if I can trust anyone again. You will, Margaret promised. Not today, but eventually. Your father always believed in second chances and new beginnings. That night, Margaret stood at her window. We did it, she whispered to David's memory. Our boy is safe. 6 months later, at a small gathering Tom hosted, he stood and said simply, I want to thank my mom for never giving up, for seeing what I couldn't. Mom, being your son is the greatest gift of my life. Margaret smiled through tears. Being your mother is mine. 3 years later, Margaret stood in Tom's nursery, a real nursery this time, holding her actual granddaughter, Emily Rose, named after David's mother. The baby had Tom's eyes and Margaret's determined chin, and she was absolutely, perfectly, beautifully real. Tom stood in the doorway watching his mother rock his daughter, his wife Rachel beside him. Rachel was a trauma therapist Tom had met in a support group for fraud victims. She was patient, genuine, and real in ways Jessica never could be. They dated for 2 years before marrying, building trust slowly and carefully. When Rachel got pregnant, Tom had been terrified until the ultrasound showed an actual baby, living and moving and undeniably real. You know what I never told you? Tom said softly. Thank you. For seeing what needed to be seen, for doing what needed to be done, for saving me from a nightmare I didn't know I was living. That's what mothers do, Margaret said simply, gazing down at Emily's peaceful, sleeping face. No, Rachel interjected gently. That's what exceptional mothers do. Not everyone would have fought that hard or been that brave. Margaret smiled. I just couldn't let her destroy my son. He was too precious, too loved. That evening, after they left, Margaret sat with the yellow baby blanket she'd knitted 4 years ago during the darkest time of her life. She'd finally given it to Emily at the hospital, and Rachel had cried hearing the story behind it. The hope, the heartbreak, the faith that someday there would be a real child to wrap in its warmth. Margaret thought about the journey from discovering Jessica's lies to holding her granddaughter. The cost had been steep: pain, isolation, the risk of losing Tom forever. But love had won. Truth had prevailed. She opened her laptop and typed a message in her community support group. To anyone with a loved one being manipulated, trust your instincts, document everything, build your case carefully, don't give up even when hopeless. The truth surfaces, but sometimes it needs help. Be brave. Be patient. Be relentless. Your loved one is worth fighting for. She hit post, knowing somewhere another grandmother, another parent, another person who saw the truth was feeling powerless and afraid. Maybe her story would give them courage, because that's what survivors do. They turn pain into purpose, trials into testimony, endings into new beginnings. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Not every concerned family member is jealous or interfering. Sometimes they see dangers you cannot. Manipulation thrives in isolation. Con artists separate victims from anyone who questions the narrative. The antidote is community, documentation, and courage to investigate even when unpopular. A mother's love isn't always gentle. Sometimes it's fierce, protective, willing to be misunderstood. Sometimes it means being the villain in someone's story so they survive to write a better one. Lies may win battles, but truth wins wars. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning, healing, and building wisdom from pain. Have you ever suspected someone in your family was being manipulated or scammed? What did you do? Were you dismissed like Margaret? Or did your loved ones listen? If you were in Margaret's position, would you have exposed Jessica the same way or handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments.